The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched far into the distance. Its walls were made of crystal that showed the stars beyond. Light from 3 different suns came through the ceiling, making rainbow colors dance across the floor. This was Nexus Prime, the most important place in the galaxy where all the big decisions were made. Kang Day walked into the hall carrying only a small data pad. His black shoes made soft sounds on the smooth floor. He wore a simple dark suit that looked plain compared to the fancy clothes and strange bodies around him. The human diplomat was not tall or short, not young or old. He looked like someone you might see on any street corner back on Earth. Around him, the real powers of the galaxy were talking. The Vorthak Empire controlled over 2,000 star systems. Their people looked like giant lizards that walked on 2 legs. They had sharp teeth and scales that changed colors when they got angry or excited. Ambassador Yul Hana was the biggest Vorthak in the room. Her scales were deep green with gold, edges that showed her high rank. The Luminary Collective was different. They were beings made of pure energy that could take any shape they wanted. Right now, Prime Consciousness Ryu Bora looked like a tall woman made of blue light. She floated a few inches above the ground and her voice sounded like music when she spoke. The Luminary lived for thousands of years and thought this made them very wise. The third group was the Hive Clusters. These were insect-like creatures that thought with one shared mind. Warmaster Shinte had 4 arms and 6 legs. His head was shaped like a triangle with big black eyes that could see in all directions at once. When one member of the Hive spoke, they all knew what was said instantly. These 3 powers had ruled the galaxy for hundreds of years. They had fought wars, made peace, and divided up the stars between them. They saw themselves as the most advanced beings in the universe. Teu found an empty seat near the back of the hall. Nobody paid attention to him. Humans had only been traveling between stars for about 50 years. Most aliens thought Earth people were too new and too primitive to matter. They let humans have a few small colonies on the edge of known space. But that was all. The meeting that day was about trade routes and mining rights. Ambassador Hana was complaining about Luminary ships using Vorthak space lanes without paying fees. Prime Consciousness Bora said the fees were too high and unfair. War Master Tay wanted both sides to use Hive transport services instead. Day waited patiently while they argued. He had tried to get speaking time on the official schedule, but the alien bureaucrats had put him off. They said human matters could wait until next month or maybe next year. There were more important things to discuss first. After 2 hours of listening to the same arguments over and over, Day finally stood up. He walked to the speaking area in the center of the hall. The 3 alien groups stopped talking and looked at him with surprise and annoyance. "Excuse me," Day said in a normal voice that somehow carried clearly through the huge hall. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have some information that might interest you." Ambassador Hana's scales turned orange, which meant she was irritated. "Human diplomat, you have not been recognized to speak. These are matters for established civilizations to decide." "Of course," Day said politely. "I just thought you should know that Earth has finished cleaning up that situation on our border, the one with the Devourers." The hall went quiet. The Devourers were machines that ate entire planets. They had been attacking worlds on the rim of the galaxy for over 300 years. Every few months, another star system would go dark. The 3 great powers had built walls of warships to keep the Devourers contained, but nobody had ever stopped them completely. Prime Consciousness. Bora floated down closer to Day. Her blue light grew brighter with interest. "What do you mean, by cleaning up, human?" "Well, they were making a mess in our neighborhood," Day explained like he was talking about trash on his lawn. "So we took care of the problem. It took about a year and a half all told." War Master Tay's forearms moved, in patterns that showed confusion. "The machine entities have been contained. You built new barrier fleets?" "Oh no," Day said. "We didn't contain them. We destroyed them. All of them. The Devourer threat no longer exists." The silence that followed was so complete that you could hear the air moving through the ventilation systems. Ambassador Hana's scales went through several color changes as her brain tried to process what the human had said. "That is impossible," she finally whispered. Day looked genuinely puzzled by their reaction. "Is it? I mean, they were dangerous, but once we figured out how they worked, it was mostly just a logistics problem." Logistics? Prime consciousness. Bora's musical voice hit a high note that made the crystal walls ring. "Young human, the Devourer fleets consumed 17 worlds just this past year. They adapt to any weapon used against them. Their numbers seem unlimited. The greatest military minds of 3 civilizations have studied this threat for centuries and concluded that complete victory is impossible." Day said, checking something on his datapad. "I guess we got lucky then. Our military researchers found their central programming pretty easy to crack. Once we understood how their adaptation systems worked, we could make weapons they couldn't adjust to fast enough." He said this like he was discussing the weather or what he had for breakfast. The casual tone made his words even more shocking. To the alien leaders. War Master Tay leaned forward, all 6 of his legs tensed. "You speak as if the galaxy's greatest nightmare was merely an inconvenience." "Well, yeah, pretty much. Don't get me wrong, they were aggressive, but their attack patterns were predictable once you mapped their decision trees. We lost a few ships in the early encounters before we worked out the best tactics." Ambassador Hana found her voice again. "How many ships did humanity lose to completely eliminate the Devourer threat?" Day scrolled through his datapad for a moment. "Let me see, looks like we lost 47 vessels total. Mostly smaller patrol ships that got caught during the initial contact phase." 47 ships, Prime Consciousness Bora repeated slowly. "To destroy an enemy that has threatened galactic civilization for 3 centuries. That's what it says." "Here," Day confirmed. "Though I should mention that was just our losses in the Devourer theater. We were handling a couple other situations at the same time, so total casualties were a bit higher." The 3 alien leaders looked at each other with expressions that mixed disbelief with growing alarm. The Vorthak Empire had lost over 1 million ships just keeping the Devourers from breaking through the containment line. The Luminary had sacrificed entire star systems as buffer zones. The Hive clusters had built their whole military strategy around the threat these machines represented, and a species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers had wiped out the Devourers while apparently fighting other wars as well. The humans had done it so quietly that the rest of the galaxy hadn't even noticed until now. Day seemed unaware of the shock he was causing. He looked around the magnificent hall with mild interest, like a tourist seeing the sights. When his eyes met those of the alien leaders, he smiled the way someone might when meeting neighbors at a community gathering. "Anyway," he said cheerfully, "I didn't mean to interrupt your meeting. I just thought you should know the situation has been resolved. Should I come back another time to discuss the real issue we need to talk about?" Ambassador Hana's scales had turned bright red, which meant she was either very angry or very scared. Maybe both. She pointed one of her clawed fingers at Day and spoke in a voice that shook with emotion. "Human, what you claim is impossible. The Devourers cannot be destroyed. They learn from every attack. They grow stronger with each battle. If what you say is true, show us proof." Day nodded like this was a reasonable request. He touched his datapad, and suddenly the air above the center of the hall filled with pictures made of light. The aliens had seen human technology before, but their holograms were usually fuzzy and unclear. These images were so sharp and detailed they looked real. The first image showed a star system that everyone in the room recognized. It was Kepler 442, a place where the Devourers had built one of their biggest bases. For over a century, this system had been a black hole on star maps. No ship that went there ever came back. But in the image floating before them, Kepler 442 was full of activity. Human ships moved between the planets like busy insects. The worlds that had been stripped bare by the Devourers now showed green and blue patches where new life was growing. On the largest planet, huge machines were breaking apart the dark metal structures the Devourers had built and turning them into something else. This was taken 3 months ago, Day explained. We're turning the old Devourer facilities into research stations and mining operations. The materials they used are pretty useful once you know how to work with them. Prime consciousness. Bora floated closer to the images. Her blue light flickered as she tried to understand what she was seeing. The death machines. You are using their own technology? Sure. Waste not, want not, as we say back home. The Devourers built some impressive stuff. Their hull materials are stronger than anything we had before, and their power cores are incredibly efficient. We've been able to improve our ship designs quite a bit, using what we learned from them. The next image made War Master Tay's triangle-shaped head twitch with shock. It showed the wreckage of a Devourer fleet floating in space. These were not small patrol ships, but the massive fortress vessels that could crack planets in half. Hundreds of them drifted lifeless among the stars, their dark metal hulls twisted and torn. This is the main battle site from about 14 months ago. Day continued in the same casual tone he might use to show vacation photos. The big fight happened when we found their central command node. They threw everything they had at us, but by then we had figured out how to jam their communication systems. Once they couldn't coordinate properly, the battle was over pretty quickly. Ambassador Hana stared at the images of destroyed Devourer ships. Each one of those vessels could have conquered a star system on its own. She had seen them in action during the border wars. They moved like living things and fought with intelligence that seemed almost magical. Now they were just scrap metal floating in the void. How? She whispered. How did you defeat them? Day seemed surprised by the question. Well, like I said, we studied their programming first. Took our computer experts about 6 months to crack their base code. Turns out the Devourers were built by someone else a long time ago. They're not really alive, just very advanced artificial intelligence following orders from creators who died thousands of years back. He touched his data pad again, and the images changed to show complex diagrams and charts. Once we understood their core programming, we could predict their behavior. They had 3 main directives: consume resources, build more ships, and eliminate threats to their mission. But they could only adapt to new situations within those basic rules. War Master Tay studied the diagrams with his forearms crossed. As a military leader, he understood the importance of what the human was showing them. You found a weakness in their adaptability. Exactly, Day smiled, like a teacher whose student had given the right answer. The Devourers could learn to resist any weapon or tactic, but only if it fit within their understanding of warfare, so we gave them problems they weren't designed to solve. The next image showed human ships doing something that seemed impossible. They were phasing in and out of normal space, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. When they fired their weapons, the energy beams bent around the Devourer ship's shields and hit them from behind. We used dimensional shifting technology, Day explained. The Devourer's creators never encountered anything like it, so they didn't program any defenses against attacks from parallel dimensions. Their shields and armor were useless against weapons that existed in multiple realities at once. Prime consciousness. Bora's light grew brighter with excitement and fear. Where did you acquire dimensional shifting technology? Such science should take millions of years to develop. Oh, we got it from the Void Wraiths, Day said matter-of-factly. They had been bothering some of our outer colonies, so we had to deal with them anyway. Once we captured a few and studied how they move between dimensions, our scientists were able to build machines that could do the same thing. The hall went completely silent again. The Void Wraiths were energy beings that could walk through solid matter and appear anywhere they wanted. They had been attacking Luminari worlds for 200 years. The collective consciousness of the Luminari had been created specifically to coordinate defenses against enemies that could strike without warning from thin air. You dealt with the Void Wraiths? Ambassador Hana's voice cracked as she spoke. Had to. Day nodded. They kept showing up in our civilian areas and scaring people. We built some quantum nets that could hold them in one dimension long enough to relocate them somewhere safer. Found them a nice empty dimension where they could do their thing without bothering anyone. War Master Tay made a sound that was part laugh and part scream. You relocated the Void Wraiths. You moved beings of pure energy to another dimension for the safety of your civilians. Well, yeah. They weren't really evil, just confused. Turns out they were running from something in their home dimension and ended up in ours by accident. Once we gave them a safe place to hide, they stopped attacking our worlds. Day touched his datapad again and new images appeared. These showed sleek mechanical ships with designs that War Master Tay recognized immediately. They were sentry vessels, the automated warships that had held the Outer Rim systems in a state of constant war for over 2 centuries. But in the images, humans were walking around inside them, using them like tools. The sentries were trickier, Day admitted. Their programming was more complex than the Devourers and they had better adaptive systems. But they made one mistake. They tried to capture our ships instead of just destroying them. Once we had some of their technology to study, we could reverse engineer their command codes. The sentries have been neutralized as well? Prime Consciousness Bora's musical voice had become very high and thin. Mostly. We kept a few of the smarter ones as research assistants. They're actually pretty helpful once you convince them to stop trying to conquer everything. The rest we converted into construction equipment. They're great at building things quickly and efficiently. Ambassador Hana felt dizzy. The 3 great threats that had shaped galactic politics for centuries were gone. The Devourers that consumed worlds, the Void Wraiths that struck from nowhere, and the sentries that turned space into a war zone. Humanity had eliminated all of them while the rest of the galaxy wasn't even paying attention. How many humans died in these conflicts? She asked quietly. Day checked his datapad again. Let's see. Total military casualties across all 3 theaters came to about 12,000 personnel. Most of those were in the early encounters before we developed effective countermeasures, 12,000. The Vorthak Empire alone had lost millions of soldiers fighting just one of these enemies. The Luminari had sacrificed entire star systems. The Hive clusters had built their entire civilization around the need to fight these threats. What are you? Prime Consciousness Bora whispered. Day looked genuinely confused by the question. We're humans, from Earth. I thought you knew that already. But humans are supposed to be a young species, War Master Tay protested. You achieved faster than light travel only decades ago. Your technology should be primitive compared to ours. I guess we're quick learners, Day shrugged. Plus having 3 different alien technologies to study really helped speed up our development. The Devourers, Void Wraiths, and Sentries all had different approaches to solving problems. Combining their knowledge with our own gave us some interesting new possibilities. He said this like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like, any species would obviously study their enemies and learn from them. Like defeating galactic-level threats was just another Tuesday for humanity. The alien leaders looked at each other with growing horror. They were beginning to understand that they had seriously misjudged the species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers. Earth was not a minor colony world on the edge of civilization. It was home to something that could treat the galaxy's worst nightmares as minor inconveniences. You said this was about a real issue you needed to discuss, Ambassador Hana said, slowly. If these 3 threats were not the real issue, then what is? Day smiled in a way that somehow made all 3 alien leaders feel cold, despite the warm air in the hall. It was not a mean smile, but it carried a weight that pressed down on them like gravity from a dying star. Well, that's the thing, he said, settling into his explanation like someone about to tell a long story. While we were cleaning up those 3 situations, our deep space monitoring stations picked up something else, something much bigger. He touched his datapad, and the holographic display changed again. This time it showed a map of the galaxy, with all the star systems marked in different colors. Blue dots showed human colonies. Red areas marked Vorthak territory. The luminary systems glowed with soft yellow light, while Hive cluster space was colored green. This is our galaxy as it exists today, Day explained. About 400 billion stars, with intelligent life scattered throughout. It's been a pretty stable neighborhood for the last few thousand years. The image began to move, showing the galaxy from the side. It looked like a giant spiral of stars spinning slowly in the darkness of space. But beyond the edge of the galaxy, something else appeared in the display. It was black, darker than the space around it, and it was moving toward them. 2 years ago, our long-range sensors detected this, Day continued. His casual tone had not changed, but something about his posture made everyone in the room lean forward. At first, our scientists thought it was just empty space, a region with fewer stars than normal. Ambassador Hana stared at the dark area on the display. Her scales had turned a pale gray color that meant deep worry. What is it? Call it the darkness, Day said simply. It's not empty space. It's something that consumes light, matter, energy, everything. It exists in the void between galaxies and moves from one to another like a wave of destruction. The display zoomed in on the edge of the galaxy. War Master Tay could see individual star systems winking out as the darkness touched them. Not destroyed in explosions or consumed by machines, but simply ceasing to exist as if they had never been there at all. Our calculations show it will reach the outer rim of our galaxy in approximately 2 years, Day continued. Based on its current speed and the pattern of destruction we've observed, the entire galaxy will be consumed within 50 years after initial contact. Prime consciousness. Bora's blue light flickered like a candle in a strong wind. This darkness, it has destroyed other galaxies? Several, Day confirmed. Our deep space telescopes can track its path backward through cosmic history. It appears to move in a straight line from galaxy to galaxy, leaving nothing behind. We estimate it has been traveling for billions of years, consuming everything in its path. The images showed more details now. Charts and graphs filled with numbers that made no sense to the alien leaders but clearly meant something terrible. Calculations of energy levels, predictions of arrival times, and estimations of destruction rates scrolled past faster than anyone could read them. How do you fight something like that? War Master Tay asked. His forearms had started shaking, though he tried to hide it. That's what we've been working on, Day replied. The good news is that the darkness follows predictable patterns. It always approaches from the same direction and moves at a consistent speed. The bad news is that conventional weapons have no effect on it. Then how can it be stopped? Ambassador Hana's voice was barely above a whisper. We're not sure it can be, Day admitted for the first time. But our scientists have developed some theories. The darkness appears to be drawn to large concentrations of organized matter and energy, galaxies, star systems, civilizations. If we can disrupt its ability to locate targets, we might be able to confuse it or redirect it. The display changed to show human ships unlike any they had seen before. These vessels were enormous, larger than space stations. They bristled with weapons and equipment that seemed to bend the light around them. We've been building a defensive fleet for the past year and a half, Day explained. These ships use technology adapted from all our previous encounters. Devourer armor for protection, Void Wraith dimensional shifting for mobility, and Sentry construction techniques for rapid production. Prime consciousness. Bora studied the massive human warships with growing amazement. How many of these vessels have you built? Currently about 8,000 are operational, with another 12,000 under construction. We're planning to have 50,000 completed by the time the darkness arrives. The numbers hit the alien leaders like physical blows. 50,000 ships the size of small moons, each one incorporating technology that humanity had learned by defeating threats that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. It was a fleet capable of conquering every known civilization combined. But even with 50,000 ships, you're not certain of victory, War Master Tay observed. No, Day agreed honestly. The darkness is unlike anything we've encountered before. Our simulations give us roughly a 60% chance of success with our current plans. And if you fail? Ambassador Hana asked. Then we evacuate, Day said as if discussing weekend plans. We've already identified several galaxies that appear to be safe from the darkness's current path. Our evacuation fleet can transport about 12 billion people to safety if necessary. 12 billion, Prime Consciousness Bora repeated. That is more than the population of most star systems. It's not ideal, Day admitted. We'd prefer to save everyone. But transport capacity has limits. We're still working on expanding our evacuation capabilities, but time is running short. The alien leaders sat in stunned silence as the full scope of humanity's situation became clear. While they had been arguing about trade routes and mining rights, their human neighbors had been preparing for the defense of the entire galaxy. They had built a fleet that dwarfed anything the established powers could imagine, and they had backup, plans that included evacuating billions of people to other galaxies. "Why are you telling us this?" Ambassador Hana finally managed to ask. "Because you live here too," Day replied with the same straightforward simplicity he had shown throughout the conversation. "The darkness doesn't care about politics or territory. It will consume Vorthak, Luminari, and Hive systems just as readily as human ones. We thought you should know what's coming." War Master Tay's military mind was beginning to process the implications. "You're asking us to join your defense efforts." "Actually, no," Day said, surprising everyone. "We're not asking you to join us. We're offering to include you in our plans if you want to participate. There's a difference." "I don't understand." Prime Consciousness Bora's musical voice sounded confused. "Humanity has accepted responsibility for defending this galaxy," Day explained. "We're going to fight the darkness whether anyone else helps us or not. But we recognize that other species have their own capabilities and perspectives that could be useful. If you want to contribute to the defense, we can find ways to incorporate your forces into our battle plans." "And if we choose not to participate?" Ambassador Hana asked. "Then we'll do our best to protect your worlds anyway," Day shrugged. "Like I said, you live here too. We're not going to let anyone get consumed by the darkness if we can help it." The casual way he said this made it even more shocking. Humanity was offering to defend alien civilizations that had treated them as inferiors. They were willing to risk human lives to protect species that had barely acknowledged their existence. "You would fight for us, even if we refused to help?" War Master Tay asked in disbelief. "Of course." Day looked puzzled that this was even a question. "It's our neighborhood. We protect our neighbors." Ambassador Hana felt something break inside her mind. Everything she had believed about the galaxy, about her own species' place in it, about the natural order of things, was crumbling. Humans were not the primitive newcomers she had thought they were. They were something else entirely. "What do you need from us?" she heard herself asking. "Honestly, probably not much militarily," Day said with no trace of insult intended. "Your weapons and ships are impressive, but they're designed for fighting other civilizations, not something like the darkness. What would be really helpful is your knowledge and experience." He gestured to each group in turn. "The Vorthak Empire has detailed maps of every star system in the galaxy. The Luminari Collective has the most advanced sensor networks for detecting energy phenomena. The Hive clusters have unmatched logistics and coordination capabilities. All of that information could help us optimize our defense strategy." "You want our databases," Prime Consciousness Bora said slowly. "We want your partnership," Day corrected gently. "Information sharing is just part of it. If we're going to save this galaxy, we need everyone working together." The three alien leaders looked at each other across the hall. Less than an hour ago, they had been the undisputed masters of galactic civilization. Now they were being offered junior partnership in humanity's defense of existence itself. And somehow that felt like the most generous offer they had ever received. War Master Tay was the first to break the heavy silence that had fallen over the Great Hall. His triangle-shaped head tilted to one side as he studied the human diplomat with all 6 of his black eyes. "Human Day," he said carefully. "Your words describe capabilities that seem impossible. Even for a species that claims to have defeated the galaxy's greatest threats, the fleet you describe exceeds the combined military might of all known civilizations." Day nodded as if this was a perfectly reasonable concern. "I understand your skepticism. It's a lot to take in all at once. Would you like me to show you?" "Show us what?" Ambassador Hana asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "The MAP fleet," Day said simply. He touched his datapad again. "We have a small task force stationed just outside your defense perimeter. Standard diplomatic escort, nothing fancy. But it should give you a good idea of what we're working with." Prime Consciousness. Bora's blue light flickered nervously. "There are no human ships in our sensor range. Our detection systems would have identified any vessels larger than a shuttle. That's because they're not in normal space right now, Day explained. We learned from the Void Wraiths that it's often better to travel between dimensions when you want to avoid attracting attention. But I can ask them to phase back into regular reality if you'd like to take a look. Before any of the alien leaders could object, Day was already speaking into his datapad in a conversational tone. Captain Lee, this is Ambassador Day. Could you bring the task force into normal space for a few minutes? Our hosts would like to see what we're working with these days. A woman's voice responded clearly from the small device. Copy that, Ambassador. Shifting to normal space in 10 seconds. Try not to alarm anyone too much. Ambassador Hana was about to ask what that meant when every alarm in the Nexus Prime Defense Network began screaming at once. Emergency lights flashed throughout the Great Hall as automated systems detected massive energy signatures appearing just beyond the station's shields. Through the crystal walls of the hall, they could see points of light materializing in the darkness of space. But as the shapes became clearer, the alien leaders realized these were not points of light. They were ships so large that their running lights looked like stars from a distance. Oh my, Day said mildly, looking out at the vessels his people had brought. I think Captain Lee brought the heavy escort ships instead of the light ones. She must have thought this was a higher risk mission than I indicated. The ships hanging motionless outside Nexus Prime were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Each one was roughly the size of a small moon, but they moved with the grace and precision of living creatures. Their hulls seemed to shift and change, sometimes solid metal, sometimes transparent energy, sometimes something that hurt to look at directly. War Master Tay counted quickly with military efficiency. 12 vessels, each one larger than our biggest battleships. Actually 14, Day corrected gently. 2 of them are still partially phased into parallel dimensions. Your sensors probably can't detect them fully. As if responding to his words, 2 more massive shapes flickered into visibility, their forms seeming to exist in multiple realities at once. The technology, Prime Consciousness Bora whispered, her musical voice filled with awe. The hulls are incorporating dimensional shifting, adaptive matter, and energy projection simultaneously. How is that possible? It took a lot of trial and error, Day admitted. The first few prototypes tended to explode when we tried to combine Devourer armor with Void Wraith phasing technology. But our engineers figured out how to stabilize the dimensional interfaces. The Sentry construction protocols helped a lot. With that, one of the human ships began to demonstrate its capabilities without any apparent signal from Day. The vessel simply faded from sight, not by moving away but by stepping sideways out of normal reality. A few seconds later it reappeared on the opposite side of the station, having traveled instantly across vast distance by moving through parallel space. Tactical mobility, Day explained helpfully. Very useful for avoiding enemy fire or repositioning quickly during battle. The Void Wraiths taught us that the shortest distance between 2 points isn't always a straight line. Another ship began reshaping itself as they watched. Its hull flowed like liquid metal, extending weapon pods and sensor arrays that hadn't been visible moments before. Within minutes, the vessel had changed from a smooth diplomatic transport into something that bristled with offensive capabilities. Adaptive architecture, Day continued his casual explanation. We learned from the Devourers that it's better to have ships that can reconfigure themselves for different missions rather than building separate vessels for every purpose. Ambassador Hana felt her legs growing weak. She had to sit down before she fell over. Those are your escort ships? Your diplomatic guard? Well, Captain Lee does tend to be overcautious, Day said with mild amusement. But yes, these are fairly standard vessels in our current fleet. Nothing too special about them. Nothing special, War Master Tay repeated in a hollow voice. Any one of those ships could probably destroy his entire home fleet single-handed. The demonstration continued, as if choreographed, though Day insisted his people were just showing off a little. One of the human vessels fired a beam of energy that passed through the shields of Nexus Prime without causing any damage, but somehow left a message written in letters of light on the far wall of the Great Hall. The message read, "Greetings. From humanity, we come in peace. Show-offs, Day muttered, but he was smiling. Captain Lee has a sense of humor. That weapon passed through our shields as if they didn't exist, Prime Consciousness Bora said, her blue light now pulsing rapidly, with what might have been panic. Selective phase targeting, Day nodded. The beam existed in the same dimension as your wall, but not the same dimension as your shields. Took us a while to work out the physics, but it's very handy for precision strikes. Another ship began broadcasting, something that made all the alien communication systems in the hall activate at once. Screens lit up with data streams in hundreds of different languages and formats. The information flowing past was too fast to read, but they could see star charts, technical specifications, and what looked like real-time battle reports from across the galaxy. Our ships automatically share information with any friendly receivers. In range, Dai explained. We found that keeping everyone informed tends to prevent misunderstandings. This data, Ambassador Hana said, staring at the scrolling information. These are reports from battles we never knew happened. Mostly cleanup operations, Day shrugged. Small groups of devourers that we missed in the main sweep. A few void, wraith scouts that needed relocating. Some sentry units that required reprogramming. Nothing worth bothering the Council about. The aliens were beginning to understand that humanity's definition of nothing worth mentioning was very different from their own. What Day called cleanup operations would have been major military campaigns for any other species. How many ships like these do you have? War Master Tay asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. These are Mark 7 heavy escorts, Day said, checking his datapad. I think we have about 3,000 of them operational right now, but they're being replaced by the Mark 9 design, which is quite a bit more capable. More capable than what we're seeing now? Prime Consciousness Bora's voice had become very small. Well, the Mark 9 ships can function in multiple dimensions simultaneously and carry their own construction facilities for building support vessels during extended operations. Plus, they have much better sensors and more efficient power systems. But the real advantage is that they can link together into larger structures when needed. As if to demonstrate this point, two of the ships outside began moving toward each other. Their hulls flowed and merged, creating a single vessel that was clearly more than the sum of its parts. New weapons emerged, additional sensor arrays deployed, and the combined ship began to glow with energy levels that made the alien detection systems scream warnings about imminent power overloads. Fleet combination protocols, Day noted with satisfaction. Very useful for dealing with threats that are too big for individual ships to handle. The merged vessel separated back into two ships as smoothly as they had combined, as if the whole process was as natural as breathing. And this is your diplomatic escort, Ambassador Hana said weakly. Like I said, Captain Lee is cautious. Normally, we just send a single ship for something like this, but she insisted on a full honor guard since we were visiting the Galactic Council. War Master Tay made a sound that might have been laughter or crying. An honor guard that could conquer our entire civilization. Oh, these ships aren't designed for conquest, Day said, looking genuinely shocked at the suggestion. They're purely defensive vessels. Our actual military fleet is much more heavily armed. The silence that followed this statement lasted so long that Dai began to look concerned. He spoke into his datapad again. Captain Lee, I think our demonstration might have been a bit overwhelming. Could you have the task force phase back to dimensional standby? We don't want to make our hosts uncomfortable. One by one, the massive, human ships faded from normal space until only empty darkness remained outside the crystal walls. Dee's expression became more serious as he looked at each of the alien leaders in turn. For the first time since entering the Great Hall, he seemed to choose his words carefully. I'm not asking anything of you, he said slowly. That's important, for you to understand. Humanity has already decided to defend this galaxy. We're going to fight the darkness whether you help us or not. He touched his datapad, and new images appeared in the air above them. These showed detailed battle plans with thousands of ships arranged in complex formations around star systems throughout the galaxy. Our primary defense strategy involves 3 phases, Day continued. Phase 1 begins in 18 months. We'll start evacuating non-combatant populations from the outer rim systems to safer areas in the galactic core. We've already identified 12,000 worlds that will need to be cleared before the darkness arrives. Ambassador Hana stared at the evacuation plans. The logistics alone were staggering. Moving entire planetary populations across thousands of light years would normally take decades, even with the most advanced transportation systems available. "How long will Phase 1 take?" she asked. "About 6 months," Day replied. "Our transport ships can carry roughly 2 million people per vessel, and we have 800 dedicated evacuation ships already built. We're still constructing more, but 800 should be enough for the first wave of relocations." War Master Tay did quick calculations in his head. 800 ships carrying 2 million people each, making multiple trips over 6 months. The number suggested that humanity could evacuate more people in half a year than most civilizations could transport in a century. Phase 2 involves establishing defensive positions at key choke points throughout the galaxy, Day continued. The display showed massive fortifications being built around certain star systems, turning entire regions into fortress zones. "We'll position our main battle fleets where they can do the most good when the darkness arrives." "And Phase 3? Prime consciousness, Bora asked, though her musical voice was barely audible. "Phase 3 is the actual battle," Day said simply. "When the darkness reaches the galaxy's edge, we hit it with everything we have. If our calculations are correct, we can either destroy it or force it to change course away from populated areas." Paused and looked directly at each alien leader. "If our calculations are wrong, Phase 4 goes into effect immediately. Mass evacuation to the Andromeda Galaxy using our emergency transport protocols." The images changed to show enormous ships unlike anything they had seen before. These vessels were clearly designed for one purpose: carrying as many people as possible across the vast emptiness between galaxies. "Phase 4 ships can transport 12 billion people to safety," Day explained. "The journey to Andromeda will take about 8 years, but we've designed the vessels as self-contained habitats. People can live normal lives during the crossing." 12 billion people, Ambassador Hana repeated. "How many humans is that?" "About 3 billion, Day said. "The rest of the transport capacity is reserved for other species." War Master Tay felt his forearms begin shaking again. "You built evacuation ships with space for 9 billion non-humans." "Well, we couldn't just save ourselves and leave everyone else to die." Day looked puzzled that this needed explanation. "You're all people, too. You have families, cultures, histories that deserve to be preserved. But you've never asked us if we wanted to be saved," Prime Consciousness Bora pointed out. "True," Day nodded. "But we figured it was better to build the capacity and not need it than to need it and not have it. If you prefer to stay and fight, that's your choice. If you want to evacuate to Andromeda, the ships will be ready." Ambassador Hana felt tears starting to form in her eyes, though she wasn't entirely sure why. "You planned to save us all along." "Of course," Day smiled gently. "Like I said before, we're neighbors. Good neighbors look out for each other." The display changed again, showing coordination centers on hundreds of worlds throughout the galaxy. Each one was marked with symbols indicating human personnel and equipment. "We've already begun setting up evacuation processing centers on major worlds in each of your territories," Day continued. "Our people are working with local authorities to identify priority populations and establish transport schedules. We wanted to have everything ready before we told you about the situation." "You've been planning this for how long?" War Master Tay asked. "About 18 months, Day said, "ever since we first detected the darkness approaching. We knew we'd need time to build the ships and organize the logistics, so we started immediately." "Without asking permission," Ambassador Hana observed. "We didn't think you'd object to being saved," Day said with a slight smile. "Though if you do object, we can remove our personnel and equipment from your worlds. We're not trying to invade or colonize anything. We just want to help." Prime Consciousness, Bora floated closer to the human diplomat. "What do you need from us to make these plans work? Honestly, your cooperation would be helpful, but it's not essential," Day said. "We've designed our systems to work with or without direct alien participation, but there are things you could do that would make everything more efficient." The display showed detailed star charts with transportation routes marked between systems. Some routes were highlighted in green, others in yellow or red, Your governments control the hyperspace lanes between star systems, Day explained. If you gave our evacuation ships priority access, we could move people much faster. Without that access, we'll have to use longer routes that take more time. What else? War Master Tay asked. Information sharing would be enormously valuable, Day continued. You know your own populations better than we do. Cultural preferences, special needs, important sites that should be preserved. That kind of local knowledge could help us save more people and do it more effectively. And militarily? Ambassador Hana asked. Your fleets could provide escort services for evacuation convoys, Day said thoughtfully. The darkness isn't the only threat out there, pirates, rogue AI, spatial anomalies. Your ships might not be effective against the darkness itself, but they're perfectly capable of handling smaller problems that might interfere with our operations. The alien leaders were quiet for several minutes as they absorbed the full scope of what humanity was offering. Not just defense against an unimaginable threat, but complete evacuation plans for entire civilizations. Backup plans for their backup plans. Hope when they hadn't even known they needed it. If we agree to cooperate, Prime Consciousness Bora said carefully, what authority would our forces have in this operation? Whatever authority you want, Day replied immediately. We're not trying to take over your governments or your military structures. We're offering partnership, not conquest. Your ships would operate under your own command, following your own rules and procedures. We'd just coordinate our activities to avoid conflicts or duplication of effort. And if we choose not to participate at all, War Master Tay asked. Then, we wish you well and hope you stay safe, Day said sincerely. Our evacuation ships will still be available if you change your minds. Our defensive plans will still protect your worlds to the best of our ability. The offer to relocate to Andromeda will remain open until the last transport leaves. Ambassador Hana found herself crying openly now, tears streaming down her scaled cheeks. Why are you doing this for us? Day looked genuinely surprised by the question. Because it's the right thing to do. Because you're people and you deserve to live. Because we have the ability to help, and that creates a responsibility to actually help. He paused and looked around the great hall where they sat, with its crystal walls and rainbow lights from distant suns. And because this is our galaxy too, now, he added quietly. All of our species have made homes here. We've built cities, raised families, created art and music and stories. The darkness wants to take all of that away from us. We're not going to let that happen. The human diplomat stood up and smoothed his simple dark suit. He looked like an ordinary man getting ready to leave an ordinary meeting. But his next words carried the weight of an entire species' commitment. The call to arms has sounded, he said in a voice that somehow filled the enormous hall without growing louder. Humanity will stand guard. We will hold the line against the darkness no matter what it costs us. Your participation is welcome, but not required. Your survival is our responsibility either way. He picked up his data pad and tucked it under his arm. I'll be staying on Nexus Prime for the next 3 days if you want to discuss details. After that, I need to return to Earth to help with the final preparations. Captain Lee will maintain a communication relay in case you need to contact us urgently. Day walked toward the exit of the Great Hall, his footsteps echoing in the crystal chamber. Just before he reached the door, he turned back to face the 3 alien leaders one last time. For what it's worth, he said with a gentle smile, I hope you decide to fight with us. It would be nice to have friends standing beside us when the real battle begins. And then he was gone, leaving behind 3 of the galaxy's most powerful leaders sitting in stunned silence, trying to understand that they had just been offered salvation by a species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers.